Thank you very much. I always, what did you say? Inspire and something else. And I always have this nanosecond of, ooh, I hope so. It's just something I always notice with all the guests speaking. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Today is good news, great joy, all people. Good news, great joy, all people. And I didn't know when I decided to talk about that the daily word for today was joy. So that was fairly auspicious. I want to talk about it, though, in a little bit different way than we might be used to it. When we hear the good news, great joy, all people, largely the mind kind of goes to the Christmas, right? We hear the Christmas scripture, which is in Luke. The angel comes to the shepherds and says, "Do not be afraid. I bring you good news. I bring you good news that will cause great joy for all the people." It's that's in the Gospel of Luke, chapter 2, and it's a great. It's not a one time a year kind of message. Good news, great joy, all people. It's actually kind of like it's not that I'm always a huge fan of a to-do list. However, it's really kind of a good to-do list that, to keep me focused on, what's my good news, what's great joy, and who are all people, which sounds like it would be easy, but it's sort of become this for me, this to-do list, living through pandemic and, knowing that now, the church at Unity Village Chapel, like other churches, had, open doors and we're meeting, in some fashion, in person, and then having to maybe back away from that a little bit. And it's just gone on so freaking long that there's this just, I call every day now Blur's Day, because I just really never know what's going to happen, when, how, or why, and trying to remember things, even with a calendar, even with a real to-do list. It just is sometimes my days are overwhelming. Sometimes my moments are just hard. Sometimes they're lonely. Sometimes I'm looking for, the light at the end of the tunnel, that you don't want to be a train. But it remind, when I first started thinking about this, good news, great joy, all people, it actually, believe it or not, it reminded me of those late night infomercials, which I don't even know if they're late night anymore, because TV has changed so drastically. But when you think about infomercials, there's somebody who's whatever, item they're trying to sell, that they're hawking to us. And but they're really, really enthusiastic. And every once in a blue moon, for me, I kind of go a little, like, really enthusiastic. And then there's all these lofty claims of what this product is that they're selling, that they want us to buy, and, promising this and that. And it's, it like, it's going to transform, something magical in your world, or, the emotional well-being, and all of these wonderful things that just from a simple toaster oven, or the garden hose, or the new step ladder, should I buy the product and bring it home? And there are times when that sales pitch is really, is presented well enough, where I go, wow, that sounds really good, right? Like, they really are enthusiastic and bring it on. And then sometimes not. And I might actually, on a couple of rare occasions in my life, I've actually, purchased a product, and it comes, and sometimes I'm disappointed. Like, the product arrives 4 to 6 weeks later, and I'm disappointed. I'm like, wow, this is not what like, all of this hype around this product, that again, this toaster oven was going to transform my world and my life, and the best toast ever in the whole wide world. And so I kind of look at this. So when I go back to that scripture from the Gospel of Luke, and the angel comes to the shepherds and says, "Don't be afraid. I bring you good news of great joy for all people." I kind of think of it as an angelic infomercial, which I'm not downplaying at all. It's this really, it's quite a lofty message. So the writer of the Gospel of Luke really is thinking this huge, really big claim of that one child is going to bring into the world, that here's this list of features that is beyond my comprehension, like universal good news, great joy, all people. um, that these claims that the angels are saying that's going to come about from one nondescript baby that's lying in a feeding trough in a barn somewhere, and that this baby is going to make good on all this. And so that's why I kind of, I have this irreverent kind of thing of looking at it as an infomercial. And yet, as the story's written, there's something about the message that the shepherds are justified. They could have gone, yeah, no, I'm going to make a hard pass on that, but they don't, right? They actually become passionate about it and become, more pitchmen, more sort of, they carry that infomercial message on. And that's kind of how I'm looking at the good news. And I know it's like traditionally a Christmas verse, but it's an all around verse. It's an all around message. And especially in the times that we're in. Um, Good news, great joy, all people. So what does good news mean? And can we become these passionate pitchmen, like the shepherds? They hear this and they're like, okay, well, I think we're in, and we're going to keep going, and just find out more about it. So can we become that? Right? Can I become, move beyond myself and move into being the good news? And what is my good news? And it's not. So what I tend to do is, let me go to the root of the word, and even something little like the word good. I realize I have an assumption of what I think it means, right? And good is, to benefit, or something that, being kind, it's for the benefit of all. And yet when you keep going a little bit deeper into the etymology of a word, like the real roots, and to see where it comes out of, as you dig into that word, what you find is the word good means benevolence, as we gather up, as we take up something together from the foundation of benevolence. And benevolence is one of those words that there's actually a law of benevolence. And if you read Charles Fillmore, co-founder of Unity, and read some of his, that what emerges is this principle of, or I should say, principle of benevolence, that emerges out of the writing. And so I want to stick with that around the good, like the good news, to gather, to take up, and to take up together. And by the way, the word gospel, Gospel of John, Gospel of Matthew, the word gospel means good news. So what is my good news? For me, I have to come back to what it is what is the good news that I carry, knowing that it's not always the words. It's not always about words. My mother had, in our kitchen growing up, one of the walls in our kitchen, my mother had little posters or little plaques or signs or framed images that were always these kind of inspirational sayings, and they would change up during the year. And one of them said, and I'm probably paraphrasing this, but always preach the gospel, and when necessary, use words. So sometimes the good news is not my words, but that taking up together, like, how am I being in this world? How am I being? Am I being that principle of benevolence, which really becomes another word for God, for spirit, for the foundation, for that one presence and one power that is our principle, our first principle in unity. I happen to think it's one principle, four practices, right? We have one principle that we use, and then we use it in ways through prayer, meditation, to remind us of that one power and one presence, that we are each divine. And that's what the good news is am I being that principle as we gather together, as I take up whatever is in front of me to do? And so I had to look at, what is my good news? Myrtle Fillmore, co-founder of Unity, says that it's not enough to, if I speak truth, but do not live truth, then I am silent. So if I speak truth, but I do not do truth, then I am silent. And I hear that pretty clearly as it's nice to give lip service, but I need to do it. So my good news really moves into more about how I'm being, to gather together, to take up. This is the part where there's no words, right? And when necessary, don't use words. So my good news is my what is my foundation, like my mission, my why, my purpose, kind of why I'm sucking air, which is that I imagine a world where every person knows their presence here matters and has a sense of belonging. And that's what I live into. And that's how I try to be. Um, and I think sometimes successfully, but it's not so much about the words, because I can tell people unity teachings are powerful, principles for living a life that's meaningful, that's abundant, that has joy in it. And yet it's, what am I doing? Like the words are great, and how am I being? The other part of good news is that it doesn't necessarily, good news, so to speak, doesn't always mean that it feels good or that it feels comfortable. The Interestingly, in Buddhism, the idea of good news is that everything is changing. Now, in Western culture, in our Western world, that oftentimes can feel unsettling, and can be interpreted as not necessarily a positive viewpoint or something good. Like, really, like everything is changing all the time. Can we not have something to stop? I have had times in the last 18 months from time to time where I go, okay, just stop. Like, stop the world. I want to get off. Throw me a bone of no more change. This is how it's staying. I know it's not going to happen. But in Buddhism, that is the good news, that everything is changing. Therefore, I'm not stuck in anything particular. I'm not stuck or locked into any configuration. So what's my good news? What is, start with the idea of what's that? Why am I here? Why am I sucking air? That's my sort of, you know, crass way of saying it. Why am I sucking air? But why am I here? Short and sweet. What's my purpose? What's my mission? That's my good news. And then go be that, to gather up, to take up something together, and to be that in demonstration. Good news, that's good news. Great joy, all people. So what's great joy? Joy sometimes, I think, gets confused with happiness, and they're not the same thing. Happiness is something that's a little more transigent, something that's a little more depends on outer circumstances. But joy is immutable. I use the term, joy is peace dancing, right? That joy is just, you can't steal it away. It's never going anywhere. It just stays regardless of what's happening around me. It's there. I may not be aware of it. I may not be connected to it, but it's always there, so that I can, and joy doesn't necessarily mean like lots of zeal and excitement and enthusiasm, but joy is that, as I said, peace dancing, but it has an energy that I can feel secure when the world around me is shaking, that I can laugh even when everything seems to be falling apart, that I can experience connection, and I can experience abundance even when I look around me at things that are lacking. Right? It's not an either or proposition. One of the interesting things about the book of Psalms in the Hebrew Bible is that it is this hugely expansive piece of literature in terms of the message, the experience that the writers of all these songs, and that's what they are. Psalms are songs. Some are congregational, some are just very private about a faith journey. Some of them are about suffering. Some offer praise. Some are even question whether God exists, or is this all there is? Is this pain and suffering? So that the authors are all over the map, and yet in that there is this consistency, and which is the joy that is just this. It's like benevolence, right? It's just everywhere presence, and that even though the world around me might be vacillating and might be erratic and I don't know about you, but I, look out. I don't avoid the news because as a leader in Unity, it's important for me to know what's going on, but I do have to moderate it. To not know what's going on in the world doesn't serve me or those around me, but it allows me to see what is going on and then go to my to-do list. Good news, great joy, all people. So to step into what is my good news? Oh yes, it's this. To really practice, I believe that everyone's presence here matters and that we have a sense of belonging. But happiness is just more, not to be confused with joy. Um, but joy has an element of peacefulness, right? It's immutable. It's not going anywhere. It's here and I can tap into it. And regardless of the messiness and the tension and doubt and despair or grief, that's going on around me, there's still celebration, right? There's still, it's complex, it's paradoxical. Every spiritual truth is a paradox, and living in that. And that I don't have to have everything figured out to know it, to tap into it, right? It's not, I can experience doubt and still have a foundation of some joy in there. So when we, that good news, great joy, all people, when it's used in the context of Christmas, the question is always, so how do you come into this season? Psalms are songs, right? So here's this huge spectrum of these songs in the book of Psalms, the question is, so what song are you singing? With this range of emotions and experiences, what song am I singing? And how am I coming into this season? That's how we kind of use it at Christmas time. But I would ask the same question of any day, of every day. What song am I singing? What's my great joy, right? That I'm bringing. And again, it's not about zeal and putting on rose-colored glasses and and denying someone's suffering or pain or grief, or denying the things that even when I get frozen and feel overwhelmed, it's not denying that, but pausing, right? Return to my good news, which applies to me and everyone else. In the breath, and oh yeah, there's the great joy. There's the great joy. And remember I said at the beginning that the shepherds were hearing this message and the idea that this one little baby lying in a feeding trough is going to fill these lofty goals. Well, guess what? It's the story of us. It's the story of us every single day, which means we are each endowed with that same capacity to be the good news, to sing the song of great joy. And great doesn't have to mean large. Great just means depth, right? And solid. And great joy because it's meaningful for you. I mentioned Psalms, and there's this huge spectrum of experiences, and does even God exist, and or gleeful, celebration, and or solitary, contemplative, quiet prayers, and everything else. So never mind Psalms, just look at social media, right? Or just look at Netflix. If you have Netflix, you go on everything that there's too many recommendations. Like it's almost too much good news. I don't want all those recommendations. And if I look at all the things available to me, it fills this huge spectrum of human experience, that messiness. So how do I come to this season? How do I come to this day? How do I come to this relationship? How do I come to this moment? Right? What song am I singing? And if the song I'm singing is one of maybe some despair or loneliness or anger or upset, it's okay. Not all good news feels good. Remember the Buddhists, the good news is that everything's changing. So in the nature of change comes that discomfort, comes what's called a waiting room, right? There's this waiting room between, experiences. And so come back to my good news. What's the great joy in it? And then all people. What does all people mean? It literally means all people. And the irony is, if again going back to the story of Jesus' birth, of being in this manger, which is a trough, a food trough, as a we're here to using that as a metaphor, a food trough for feeding, right? So feeding all people. That's a pretty lofty goal. That's a pretty lofty claim. So 2,000 years ago, after that angelic infomercial, we now, and every spiritual leader we're offered a chance to see how to perpetuate, and to wrestle with the idea that everything doesn't always feel good, or the traditional sense of good news, um, or the traditional sense of great joy. It goes deeper than that. So we all have to decide, you know, as I as I'm, tap into my good news, that it is for all people, whether I'm aware of it or not, as I move through my day out in the world with people, and online with people. Does my faith, am I able to be hope for all? Do I have the capacity to deliver on those promises that there is good news, there is great joy, and it is for all people? That's a pretty lofty, I got it. It's a pretty lofty infomercial, right? So not to like use it as a way to overwhelm us. Can I deliver on those promises? Can I deliver? But it's my to-do list. Like I have uber long to-do lists. I got sticky notes all. If you could see my desk, you'd see a rainbow of fruit flavored sticky notes of things to do. And oftentimes I need to ignore them and come back to my to-do list. So can I be that for the world? Right? Jesus wasn't a great exception. Buddha wasn't a great exception. Um, they're just great examples, and we all have the capacity. And when to be that promise, right? To be that infomercial message, to do more than what the toaster promises. It's not for the whole world, all 7.5 billion people. It's likely my little corner of it, and that's all we really need to pay. When it says all people, who's all people right in front of me? I don't want to overwhelm somebody, right? And it's not. Can I give to the world? Can I supply to the world something that is surprisingly refreshing and simple, and really is good news, that is great joy? So I look for, tangible ways to bring news that is good. Doesn't mean it's comfortable, right? But to bring news that speaks to your presence here matters. As I said, I believe that every person um, has, to know that each person that you matter, and that your presence here matters, and that we all belong. So I look for little ways to bring that into what I do. Really often less about what I say and more about how I'm being. And I look for ways to is my joy great, in how I'm being, to all people in my path. And when I say all people, it means all people. It means everyone's included, right? It's like that teaching that, love your neighbor. Um, it's hard. I don't know about you, but I have some people in my life that are a little hard to love. Never mind liking them. I got a few people that I'm like, here, you can have them. I got no good news. I got no great joy. I can't include you because you're just way too hard. I have those people. And it's just remembering, right? Remembering and making it okay that if I'm like, it's too hard, right? Just remembering that, coming back to my good news. And maybe not today. Maybe I don't have great joy today or in this moment, and making it okay. It's not an either or. It's something we navigate through that keeps changing as the world around us is changing, but how we be it. And joy is really far less transactional. It's not dependent on anything outside of me. It really emerges from me. Um, it's remembering my good news, which is founded on, there's one presence and one power. I'm it, right? Unity's second principle. It says we are each divine. Shorten that too. There's one presence and one power, and I'm it. You're it, and we all belong. And sometimes it's really hard to see that someone belongs when they look very different, or think very different, have different beliefs, different ends of the spectrum on anything. Um, so whether it's financial struggles, physical illness, relational challenges, exterior threats, illness, you know, everything around COVID and then some, and all the fallout from that. I don't have to feel pressure to be happy, but I am invited into what's the great joy. And I get there by remembering what my good news is. And my good news is personal to me. So that's kind of your homework, is your good news that's personal to you. Um, and that and being that for all people. And then and cutting myself some slack, right? When I look back at my day and I go, yeah, in the grocery store, yeah, I was a little bit short. I had a meeting on Friday. I was in a Zoom meeting with a woman, you know, helping her with some tech stuff and social media stuff. And I got off the call with her and I thought, oh my goodness, I don't remember the last time I was in a meeting with someone, got out of the meeting and thought how nasty this person was. And I caught myself going, oh my gosh, when was the last time I had such a horrible, you know, a labeling of people? You know, it was this, what I labeled it was this intransigent, hostile nature of this person. And I thought, oh, goodness, I, I don't want to think that way about people. But you know what? I do from time to time. And I hope I'm not alone. And then I have to remember, I take a breath, good news, great joy, all people. The people that are hardest to love are our master teachers. When they're hard to love them harder. And I would hope you would do the same for me. So take this to-do list with you today. Good news, great joy, all people. You're a walking infomercial. Work it. Work seriously. Even if you're skeptical or you haven't, like, infomercials. Those are like, you know, salespeople. Yes, we are. We're pitchmen, pitch people for great, fabulous, good news, full of great joy that is for all people. Okay, so there's your marching orders, your new to-do list. Write down what your good news is. Find what that is in a, you know, a little short sentence, so that you are the good news with embodying great joy for all people. And so it is. Amen.